Hi, I'm Lise Colucci, and I am a life coach over at queenbeing.com, where we help you discover, understand, and overcome narcissistic abuse and toxic relationships. Hello, good morning. Good morning, Butterfly Mama and Mel B. Is it Mel or my Mel B? Hi. How are you guys today? So, today I want to talk about narcissistic fleas. What are they, and how can you get rid of them? So, number one, let's just start off with this isn't a judgment of anyone for your behavior. This isn't to say, that any of this is something that's, excuse me, wrong with you. It may just be behaviors that you see in your life that you want to change. You know what I mean? Like, hello, Darla. Hello, Katrina. So, narcissistic fleas, what are they? They are the effect, or more like a side effect, of long-term exposure to narcissistic abuse. So they're behaviors that you pick up, like patterns in how you interact when, really especially, gosh, it's really bright. Sorry, I have a crazy light today. We'll just be glowing. Good morning, Jack Lumen. So there are behaviors that you pick up from long-term exposure, and they're traits, and they especially will show up when you are in a situation where there's conflict, disturbance, triggers, anything where you feel threatened or like you need to be on the defense for yourself to keep yourself safe. So, and they also can show up just when you're annoyed, or like when someone displays a behavior that's really survivory. Do you know what I mean? Like it shows the vulnerability and weakness in a survivory way. I've seen people attack others in that regard without even meaning to. So, oh, excellent. Alicia says, I swear you read my mind when you pick a topic. Well, you know what? There's so many, there's just, this stuff is always on your mind, right? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So, well, who am I missing here? Good morning, Alicia. Fleas, back to fleas. So basically, I see it like it's a self-protection mechanism. It's defensive self-protection, right? This is what often it is. So let's look at some examples. And if you guys have any examples of narcissistic fleas in your own life or things that you've seen, go ahead and list them here, and I'll read them off so that they're part of the dialogue as well for people who aren't reading the chat. And we'll get started. So what are some examples? And actually, normally I do like, here's some examples, and then we'll talk about how to deal with it. I'm going to kind of mix it together because I think with this one, we're talking about our own self-awareness. Let's do that. We're talking about self-awareness here. When we're talking about looking for traits in ourself, why is it blurry? There it goes. We're talking about looking for traits in ourself rather than looking for traits in a narcissist. So we're not looking for red flags. We're looking for self-awareness and the ability to learn to discern when to have a reaction to someone and how to react appropriately, right? That's the whole point. We kind of have to relearn how to communicate when under duress, and when we feel stressed out, and when we feel attacked, or when we feel threatened, or when there's disagreement. We have to know who we're dealing with and all that other stuff. But the part we can control really is our own expression of our feelings, right? And our own expressions of what we're going through. So does that make sense? And that's why I'm saying in the beginning, this isn't a judgment of anyone. Everyone has a patterning in their life of how they behave. And especially in situations where emotions take over, like the heated things in life, we all have patterns of how we behave. If we're not taught how to do it in a healthy way, then our exchanges can be toxic to other people. And we don't want that, right? So, and I'm not talking again, this is like into healing. I'm not talking about dealing with the narcissist directly. I'm talking about dealing with healthier relationships in your life when you realize, oh my gosh, that's a narc flea. So let's look at some of those narc fleas and what to do. Okay, so one thing might be snapping at others. Like someone says something and then having an immediate reaction and a judgment and snapping back at them without any pause to listen to another person's side of things, right? Okay, Alicia is saying, when I'm stressed, I get very nitpicky and flash-tempered. Yeah, and it's hard to see the forest for the trees then, right? Because we're so wrapped up in our emotional states. So something that might help that is to learn some coping skills or first of all, learn to have self-awareness about when you are stressed out, and then learn to have some coping skills for the stress so that you can calm down enough to see that you're being nitpicky and flash tempered. Obviously, you see it or you wouldn't have said it. So if you're at the point like what you're talking about where you see it, then what, right? So to me, it's all about perspective. It's using empathy in a way that isn't that's more logical. Does that make sense? Like using your empathy to say, okay, I'm totally flash tempered and being nitpicky right now. I realize I'm stressed. So you can kind of validate and be aware of what you're going through, and then depending on the situation, using some logic around it. What is the other logic plus empathy combined? So what does the other person need right now? What is this other person saying? What's going on in this situation? Like if I'm stressed out and the kids are going crazy, they're not doing anything wrong. They're just being kids, right? But I may get, like you say, flash tempered and nitpicky about everything in that situation, and I can put myself in the position of everyone else in the room if I slow down enough. Does that make sense? And then I can react appropriately. It still may need to calm down, but I don't need to be so reactive. Does that make sense? Hello, Julie. Okay, so yeah, go ahead and list some examples. I'm going to go through these, and I'm just going to forewarn, I have about 20 to 25 minutes today. I have a meeting after this. So this is a quickie. Jumping to conclusions and then not letting the others explain their side. That's kind of similar to what we just talked about. Same kind of answer would be to recognize that you're doing it. Once you recognize it and you realize it's not something you want to do, then you can, learn some skills for slowing down, some deep breathing, sometimes some people have hand, things they do to remind themselves to calm down and come back into the moment, grounding into your body, things like that. Taking a break, stepping aside, anything that can kind of calm you down, then come back to the situation and be a little more rational. Projecting and believing the projection. Okay, this sounds awful because we think of projection as something that narcs do. A narcissistic person projects. Well, honestly, everybody projects, okay? And when we project in a toxic way, it doesn't make you a narcissist per se. It's just a tactic that they use. But other people use it too. I mean, you can use it. Anyway, so projecting what you think or what's going on within you onto someone else. So someone makes a face when they're talking to you, and you project your negative beliefs about yourself onto that person's, what you think their intention is. Does that make sense? And then what you've done is created an unreal reality that's real to you. It's a total, it's a throwback to the abuse. Yes, because we have the program belief, but it's also not a very healthy communication skill because you're not allowing that other person to actually have any authenticity, right? So pulling back from that, realizing that you're doing that. I mean, a lot of this is just catching this stuff and kind of working with it as you go through it and not beating yourself up for it, right? But seeing it and then finding ways to relax the beliefs. So I'm reading real quick before I get started on examples. What's the topic? Narcissistic fleas. Okay. And excuse me if I don't read a whole lot as I'm going because, like I said, I'm here for a short time today. So I just kind of want to get through and get some information out there and also any questions. Yeah. Okay. So another one, passive-aggressive approach to any conflict, right? We've learned from having to, okay, you never get your way, right? When you're with a person who's self-absorbed. So in order to get your way, passive-aggressive tactics have likely been part of how you've had to kind of counter-manipulate the narcissist in order to, I'm not even talking about I want my way power trips. I'm talking about I want to be able to function with some identity of my own, right? In order to do that, often we get we have to employ some fairly passive aggressive tactics toward the narcissistic person, which then trains us how to behave toward other people. And then also what happens is we see anyone who has any form of self, like putting themselves on you, instead of just stopping it and saying, hey, wait a minute, I think this, like you can with a rational person, we go straight into the passive aggressive behavior and completely miss over any communication that goes on, that could go on in a healthy way. Does that make sense? Oh, okay. Julie has some examples, some real life examples of, of it being happening toward her. Okay. If I raise my voice in a way, Jack Lemmon immediately becomes upset and starts finding ways to put me down. And for the record, they are both in the chat, and he is the one that brought her in to talk about his own fleas. So we're not gossiping here. We're actually talking. He becomes upset and starts finding ways to put me down. I know he is really talking to his mom eventually. So I tell her virtually to shush. Okay. And Jack Lemmon says, yes, the passive aggressive stance in social interactions. Since my mother's covert, this was something directly learned. I'm sorry. I don't know why that dings every time, and it's not even connected. So whatever. It's not even on. Okay. Lisa's turning into a bunch of colors and flowing like a big waterfall. What? That's cool. I don't see it, but I like that. James is in the middle of the woods kayaking. Excellent. Thanks for being here and kayaking. You can go kayak. Let's see. Another thing Julie is saying, wait, I skipped part of this. He tells her he is trash and garbage, and I'm sorry, I'm mean. That's kind of the parts. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm mean, in a sarcastic tone. That's the passive aggressive. Is that what we're talking about? Because that sounds like it. That's weird. That I wonder if everyone saw me turn into a big colorful waterfall. If not, you got lucky. And Jack Lemmon says, agreed with Julie, because he has a lot of poor me, I'm going to insult myself fleas. Okay, so let's go. That's a good one. Self-deprecation in order to passive aggressively make the other person stop talking, right? What we're trying to do with a lot of this stuff is communicate. And what we're not doing when we do these things is communicate, right? So I did. Everybody saw me turn into a waterfall. I'm so excited. I'm Rainbow Girl today. That's what I'm going to call myself. Okay. Attacking before the attack happens. So assuming that some attack is going to happen because you feel a situation getting heated, and directly attacking, steamrolling the conversation, not letting anyone get a word in edgewise, over talking about something that is sort of tangential to the situation. You know what I'm talking about? It's a form of gaslighting. If you kind of want to look at it that way, it's an aggressive, verbally aggressive filibustering, really. And it is a form of gaslighting, and we gotta suck it up and say, yeah, we gaslight too sometimes, right? Okay, what do we do about it? Well, you catch it and you stop and you listen to the other person. So much can be solved if you learn to active listen. Learning to active listen means, for the very boiling it down to what it actually means, to the very simplest form, is listening without trying to come up with what you're going to say next. Just simply listening. Okay, when you do that, so much diffuses, because you're actually putting yourself with empathy into the position of the other person's speech. That doesn't mean you have to 100% believe it. And I'm not talking about dealing with narcs again. I'm talking about dealing with healthy relationships going forward in your life, okay? That when we learn to active listen as best as we can, so much of the assumptions fall off, so much of the need to project, the need to filibuster and do these things that cause damage in your healthy relationships. Julie says, it upsets me because from my perspective, he's saying that what he thinks, he's saying that's what he thinks I believe, even though it's not what he means. Do you see how that's gaslighting, Julie? Sorry, Jack. And again, this is not a judgment. We're not talking about narcissist gaslighting. We're talking about the fact that fleas get in there and we learn these behaviors because they are taught to us as normal ways of communicating and as ways of getting our way and of ways of shutting down the other person before we're hurt. Okay. So not attacking you, just saying that it kind of is because it's trying to convince her that her beliefs aren't her actual. It's saying, I know your beliefs and this is what they are. And that's what assumptions do. So stop assuming, it's assuming the best of someone who loves you, who isn't toxic, who's doing, can't hurt. Hello, Denise. And who else is in here? Butterfly Mama. And I think I missed the Truth. Hello. I have a question, says Truth. Can a person be labeled SMI and not be labeled a narcissist? SMI. What is that? SMI. Tell me what to spell that out for my brain, please. Can they be labeled SMI and not also be labeled a narcissist if they are in fact a narcissist? I don't know. I don't understand that question. Why am I not understanding that? Jack Lemon says, no worries. I know I've picked up Morris's mom's habit. Morris. Her new name is Morris. Mom's habit of gaslighting rather than trying to shut down the expression of emotions. What if, so when I feel like I need to assume, and then I go into this feeling of self-deprecation rather than rather than allowing the other person to have their actual opinion of me, I realize I'm shutting it down, right? And I know you probably do. You realize you're shutting down you're shutting down the whole conversation, right? So what I do is I actually find empathy for the other person. I look at them and I think, I actually do care what they think. I shouldn't make these assumptions. I actually care what they think. And so, then I'll say, I'm sorry, that was totally me. Keep going. It's not, anyway. And Julie says that Jack actually asked me to come dish dirt on him. Okay, Truth says, so if a person tells you how you feel, is that a sign? Well, if a person tells you how you feel, they are being, they're assuming that they know what's in your head and they're not listening to you. Right? They're not asking you. They're not listening to you. It could be a sign of narcissism. It also could just be a sign of poor communication or somebody wrapped up in their own need to be right in a situation. It really depends on the situation. Serious mental illness, okay, or severely mentally ill. I don't know how to answer that. If they are, could a person be labeled seriously mentally ill and not also be labeled a narcissist if they are in fact a narcissist? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think that people can have strong narcissistic traits and still have empathy, and that does not make them untoxic. I think someone can have very high narcissistic traits, still have some level of empathy, but be so consumed or so unstable in their emotional lives that they're unable to have healthy relationship, at least in that situation and where they are in their life, without more work and therapy. And does that mean you want to spend your life waiting? That's the question, right? Anyway, let's see. That's the best answer I have for that, because I don't actually know. I mean, can't get into diagnosis, really. I'm not qualified to diagnose. So, but I think narcissistic traits are narcissistic traits, regardless of whether the person has empathy, right? And the level of the traits. And this is important to why we're talking about fleas, because all of these fleas are narcissistic traits, right? They're the things we're looking for. They're the red flags, but that doesn't make a person a narcissist just having traits. It's the lack of empathy that makes it impossible for that person to have enough self-awareness to change these traits. And that's the part that makes it so more than toxic, but actually kind of hopeless, because what can you do if a person can't gain enough self-awareness and have the wherewithal to make changes? Okay, so I have a very short amount of time. I'm going to keep going here. So let's see. Let's get through a few more. Black and white thinking. Everything's all one way or all another way. Not seeing the other person's point of view. I think we talked about that a bit. Exaggerated emotional responses, kind of going off the deep end. Something happens, you're triggered, and then instead of, dealing with realizing I'm triggered and dealing with your own emotional response, just flying off the deep end at everything around you. And I think we talked about that in the beginning. Whoever mentioned, I think it was Alicia, what she said in the beginning. Probably the worst one is after 20 years of marriage is when I'm trying to be supportive and encouraging. He says, "You don't understand. I feel like I'm being told to just give up." So he has been taught that can be a flea that nobody understands. So it's like that's kind of programming, right? That's a programming of never being understood and believing that no one ever will ever understand you. But yeah, so what would help you there, Julie? That's a good one that, is actually, I don't know if it's workable for him, but it sounds workable to me. What would help you there instead of that, what would you prefer? Like, just picture it. And what would you prefer? Or any of the situations, instead of that, knowing what happens, what would help? What would help knowing that he's got these pre-programmed things that are automatic responses and go-tos that are deep in his belief system, right? That he wants to change, but it's also just, a person who's a survivor, we want to change. We don't want to be experiencing the same thing over and over again. And we don't want to be creating it, for goodness sakes, but it's difficult to know what to do differently. It's okay that you had the wrong name. Okay. Julie says, "Maybe thanks for trying, honey." So simple. So really all you need is something really simple. That's a good one. That's a really interesting point here's the thing. When we are manifesting these narcissistic fleas, when we're out there like doing them, we aren't realizing the other person's position and what they need. So when we're in a healthy relationship or we're trying to have healthy relationships and we have a debate or an argument or we're just in a mood and we're throwing all these fleas at people, we stop paying attention to what the other person needs. And that's another flea, sort of like, it's like muting your empathy. Ooh, I like that one. I think that's kind of at the root of a lot of fleas, isn't it? It's like muting your empathy, muting your response, like putting a wall around it for a little bit so that we can self-protect. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, that thought came to me. Okay, we're going to keep going. Over-explaining. Over-explaining is another one. Over-explaining, and while we're over-explaining, it becomes word salad. So instead of when we have somebody say something to us where they're in disagreement with us, or they're telling us something we did wrong, or people often don't say you're wrong, here's the they usually say, you know what, when you did that, this happened, or you know what, maybe if you did it this way, they usually are somewhat diplomatic unless they're toxic, right? Or they're not thinking about how they tell us, but we feel wronged really easily because we've been told we're wrong so much. We've been walking on eggshells for so long, and it's like hair trigger response to start over explaining, it's like backpedaling. And you know what it looks like from the outside. If you ever watch someone over explain and throw a bunch of word salad at a situation, it looks like they're defending themselves against something, like they actually know they're wrong and they're not going to change. It doesn't look good from the outside, and it's counterproductive to what you're actually trying to do, right? A lot of these fleas are totally counterproductive to the thing we actually want, which is healthy communication. So, over-explaining is another one. A way to work with that would be to simplify your replies. Again, employing your empathy, coming back to your empathy and realizing I'm in conversation with another person. What is it they're saying to me? what is it they're saying to me? I mean, you have to override those high emotions with some high logic to kind of like, I think it helps. What do you call it when people keep speaking over you? Interrupting? Rude? No, I call it steamrolling. Like when people don't let you talk and then they just like go with what they're saying and you're trying to get a point in and they but Mel B, sometimes, like I know in coaching groups I had to have done that multiple times to people. Okay, where I don't let them talk. I do let them talk. I let them talk as much as I possibly can, but I've got limited time like I do right now. And I'm trying to condense things so that people get what they need in a short amount of time, right? And if someone is needing to like vent for 45 minutes, it's not going to work, right? So sometimes it's a combination of oneself and what one is needing to get across and the appropriateness of when we're saying it. So it's kind of like, if you mean that's just happening across the board, I don't know, would have to know the specifics, but there's different reasons that can happen, right? But when someone does that to you and you're just being simple and trying to speak, that's just somebody's like steamrolling the conversation. That's what I call it. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I've got like 5 minutes or less here. So we talked about this, but assuming what others are. We didn't talk about this. This is another one. Assuming that the world is dangerous and others are dangerous because they don't agree with you. Like assuming that as soon as someone doesn't agree, that they become dangerous. And frankly, the disagreements and the differences between people are what makes life colorful and interesting if we look at it like objectively. But it becomes a defense mechanism and thus a flea because we are like so wrapped up in needing to protect our stance, right? Like I speak, Mel B says, like I speak and others just keep talking about their own stuff and not hearing. That's called people not knowing how to active listen. Believe me. Okay. That's enough said there, but yeah. Okay. I get it. Totally get it. I feel like there could be, so let me ask you, when that happens, do you give up? Are you saying something like, I really need to be heard right now? Are you like expressing the importance of what you're saying needing to be heard, or do you get meek? I mean, it would be interesting to watch that for me, but I'm sure it doesn't feel very interesting to you. But like for myself, what I realize is inside, I don't have like as much as I want to be heard and as much as I want the communication to go both ways, I keep people at arm's length. And for me, that's my own flea, right? It's my own thing to work on to allow people in. And and people feel it. And so but they love to talk to me, right? So it's partially as being an empath and being a survivor and having a protective self-defense mechanism that keeps people at a distance. Sometimes, I don't know, I don't know you or your situation. I'm just speaking from my own because that spoke to me, but I don't know. Say more and I'll say more, but I took the words out of your fingers. That's a good one. I was going to say that, and that's not active listening. Right. And honestly, we aren't taught in our society how to active listen. It's tricky. It takes putting yourself aside and allowing the other person to have a moment of time. People don't know how to hold space for another person. They don't know how to sit in silence. And half the time here, I wish I could talk and then sit in silence just to demonstrate it, but I can't because that would be really boring to watch. Julie says, I have fleas too. My dad was real big on controlling my emotions. If I ever cried, he'd say, stop mooing. It's so mean. Yeah. I think everybody here's the thing about fleas. We call it fleas, narcissistic fleas. I think it's a cute catchword just to remind us to look at ourselves and to realize that they're not part of us. They're things that we can like pick off and flick away. We can pick them off and we can change them, right? They're not part of the mechanism of how we communicate. The thing that makes it different with a narcissist when they do these things, is that is the mechanism by which they communicate. It's their ingrained go-to responses. Yes, they're learned responses as well, but because they cannot put themselves in the position of the other person, not fully and not truly, or do they care to, there's no way to actually change the behaviors. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really, how do you change a toxic behavior if you can't see the other person's position? I don't know that you can. So that's why I keep coming back to all of this is employer empathy. And that doesn't mean you have to give in to the other person because you feel bad that they're having their experience, right? You can still hold your own experience, but you can also listen to them with a piece of that empathy, right? Let's see. I mostly stop and it makes me sad. I've started just talking and it's more like monologuing. It's a kind of sad. You know what? Sometimes we talk to the wrong people about the wrong things. That's another thing. Like, we want other people to be what we are to them, but really they're not the person to go to with that particular thing. Does that make sense? So it can be a matter of discerning who you talk to. I mean, I don't know. I'm making a ton of assumptions here based on one sentence just to throw out some ideas. I could be completely off. But maybe it speaks to someone else. I don't know. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. What else did I have here? I think that's it. I think that's it. And I have to head out in just a moment here to start. I have a group starting now. So, yeah, thank you guys for coming in this morning. Morning for me, afternoon for some of you. Enjoy your weekend. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to everything, but there is a really good chat going on here. So if anyone is watching and they want to read the chat through, it's all really topical and it's really good. So, okay. Anything else before I head out that is needed? Okay. Yeah, I think I have to think more on that one, Mel B. I feel like that's a whole nother topic that could be talked about, like how to feel heard. Ooh, I like it. Let's do it. How to feel heard. How to create a life where you are heard. I like that. Let's do it. Let's do it another day. Okay, sound good? Thank you for that idea. You're welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining me as always, and I wish you the best for your weekend and the rest of your day. Take care, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye. Oh, don't forget to hit like. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. That's it. Bye-bye.